Hello, I'm here today with Rachel Young, who is an artist in our October show called Fresh Talent. Rachel's never shown with us at the Bainbridge Arts and Crafts Gallery before, but we're excited to show her work. My name is Deborah Rosinski. I'm an executive director at Bainbridge Arts and Crafts, and I'm here today to ask Rachel a few questions about her really pretty unique process, making imagery using tiny glass beads, like a mosaic artist would, carefully placing things to create color and depth and shadow. So I'm really curious how you developed that process, how you came to that, and also about your background in general, in the arts and in other areas of your life.
Okay, well, thank you for inviting me today. I'm excited to share my process. I first came across a Native American, not Native American, but an indigenous culture beading process called through the tribes of the Huichol tribe in Mexico. And when I first saw it, I was just taken aback by the color and the gradients, and it just really spoke to my heart. And I have never at that point pursued art as a profession or even hit on a medium that really spoke to me. So I was kind of all over the place, considered myself artistic, but not an artist in any way. And years later, I came across a kit that showed me how to do that type of beading. And I purchased the kit, and it was very simplistic. And after doing it a few times, I absolutely fell in love with it. I had taken some painting courses in college, but struggled with mixing of the paint. And for me, mixing of the beads is just so much more concrete and easier to do in my mind. I don't know if it's necessarily easy, but I did bring a sample of this is the Huichol art. And so they use very, very tiny beads, smaller than me. I use a size 11 bead, and it's very spiritual. And for me, I struggled with duplicating patterns, and it wasn't really my voice anyway. So I worked really hard to turn that into a contemporary art form. But the mainstay of that particular art is they set the beads into wax. And it's much more pliable. You don't use glue. And for a busy mom at that point, that was something that I could do for a little bit, set aside, and then come back to. So that was the start. And my background is I was in sales and marketing, graduated with a degree in psychology. Nothing super artistic at all. And then I went back to school in 2000 to become a nurse. So I am a full-time professional nurse. I work for Medicaid and connect people with care across all levels of income. And that is my day job. And after I'd been doing that for several years, that's when I came across the beading. So the two have kind of merged, and my art is really focused on a spirituality that I find within myself, and a depth of that I'm trying to communicate, a depth of compassion and growth and healing. And one area where my art has particularly grown back in 2018, I had a major medical trauma happen. I dislocated my hip, and I it took me quite a while to get to safety and to get help. And when I did, there were some medical errors that were complicated. So a dislocated hip became a very big situation. And then I was not able to walk for probably about 6 months. So I really was able to use that time as a way of healing because the beading is very meditative and very intentional. And it let me kind of let go of all that trauma and just really focus on putting one bead at a time and just being getting to a better place with myself.
Wow, that's quite a large life event to have dealt with. Um, I'm I'm really struck when I look at your work at there's kind of a shimmering quality, the way that you're capturing light and shadow and depth. It really comes through, and maybe something about the glass itself that the beads are made out of adds to that. Um,
It is, there is a big difference in looking at my work in a photograph versus seeing it in person.
mhm,
And there is really no comparison. It is very shiny. I use a acrylic varnish over the beads to seal everything in. The wax holds it in place fairly well, but for durability and longevity, I feel better with having that varnish on it. And and just in general, I use a lot of sparkly elements. I use rhinestones and chain. I set in charms often into the wax and bead around them. So
mhm.
it's very dimensional and very, very light catching. And it changes based on the time of day that you're looking at it. I have one piece that I set in my living room, and when the sun sets, it catches it and it like almost lights it on fire. So they're fun to look at.
Mhm. Now, I was looking through some of the images of prior work that you had sent, and one piece that had, they almost look like scarabs, or like pieces of jewelry that
Mhm.
you incorporated. So do you use some vintage items
I,
that you find at times?
I use a mix of vintage and new. You typically vintage inspired if it is new. Uh, I have been lucky to get a lot of people kind of gifting me their grandmother's jewelry or things that they find in thrift stores, which I really like, because having somebody else contribute to my supplies gives it a different voice that I wouldn't necessarily have found on my own. And most recently, someone has sent me those. I received one of the scarabs, and I love that piece.
Yeah, they add quite a bit to them. And I was curious if your work in healthcare also plays into some of the imagery you use, the repeating motif of the heart, an actual anatomical heart.
Mhm.
It's really beautifully rendered in multiple pieces that you've done. And I know it's sometimes difficult to pinpoint where ideas come from for imagery, but um,
That is definitely a huge piece. I love science and I love anatomy. Um, I love the poetry of the body and how it heals. With the anatomical hearts, I have always really been fascinated with art, or not art, but anatomy on a cellular level. And for me, that particular piece that I named Universal Heart really speaks to my background, both as a nurse and as a child of a minister. So the heart, the Sacred Heart, often comes up repeating, and then combined with the anatomy, the two together kind of have formed my language of symbology, I would say. And I really like the idea of when one cell in the heart is next to a different cell from a different heart, the two eventually start beating together.
Huh.
And that was my inspiration for universal heart. So that's an image of my heart, but it's also collectively speaks to how we can all beat together per se and live in the universe together.
Yeah, I would love it if all of our hearts beat in in unison more than they have in current times. But
Yes.
um, that's kind of a powerful thought right there. Um, well, we were very happy to discover your work. This was the first time the gallery had done an open call like this to just invite artists from Oregon and Washington to submit work, in the hopes to find new artists to show here down the road and kind of liven up the mixture of what we show. Um, so it
Yeah.
was great.
I grew up in the Seattle area, so it was so when I saw Bainbridge, I was excited to send something in, and it was because that's also my home in Washington. So I'm
Mhm.
kind of a Pacific Northwest girl, definitely West Coast because I went to school in California too.
Oh, where was that?
I went to school right out of high school in Oakland, California at Holy Names University. And there is a lot of Catholic themes in my work. My background is in religion is Episcopalian, but I really feel connected to Catholicism and have attended Holy Names University, which is a Catholic school. And then when I went back to school for nursing, I went to University of Portland, which is also Catholic.
Yeah, I definitely see that thread and the imagery that you use. Um, Reminds me of things I see from Mexico, kind of this sort of feeling of illumination and inner light in a way, um, and kind of a repetition of certain symbolic objects
Mhm.
that your pieces show.
Thank you. Yeah, I love balance too. That's the other major piece of my work. I love to have it balanced with kind of the symmetry. You were referring to the piece that I did with the scarabs and that particular piece I feel really proud of. That I always hope for balance in my work, but um, I don't necessarily always achieve it. And that was one where I was like, oh, it's perfect. I love it.
Yeah, it's a rare and fleeting feeling, isn't
It
it?
is. It
As an
is.
artist.
Yeah. And with COVID, because I feel if I don't bring up COVID, I'm remiss because that period of time when we were in lockdown was really instrumental in showing me, you know, one, the trauma of that particular time in the world and politically and with COVID was very, very difficult. And me as a nurse as well. Um, Even though I wasn't on the front lines, I had many friends who were, and there was a connection, almost like um, kind of survivor's guilt, like that I wasn't on the front lines. So I really tried to focus on developing my craft and developing this empathetic feeling towards the universe and hoping that that would just add to the good. Um, and I feel like that particular year was really instrumental in me kind of solidifying my approach to art and practice. And I hopefully I'll never have another experience where I have to do that. But it is the silver lining in that event for me and my family.
Yeah, that's great. I know most of the artists I've spoken to about it have either had an experience like you just described or the opposite, where they just couldn't make anything and they just kind of shut down for a while and regrouped mentally and emotionally. It seemed to be one or the other, not a lot in between. Um,
And as a full-time working artist too, not working as an artist, I it was such a huge gift because how often are you trapped in your home where there's no entertainment? We went through every TV show possible. So my entertainment was exactly what I created.
mhm. Well, I can't thank you enough for talking to us and giving us a little insight into your work and process. And um, it's the show is opening a few weeks from this moment that we're talking. And this video will be available shortly after the show opens. Um, we're excited to see the work out and displayed. We've got about 40 pieces total in the show, all very different. Um, so we're glad that you're a part of it, and glad that you were able to talk to us today.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited for the show and to meet everybody.
Be sure not to miss the Fresh Talent exhibition featuring 30 regional artists, all of them new to the gallery, at Bainbridge Arts and Crafts from October 1st through October 31st.